Reprise du débat, l'honorable député de Battle River, Crawford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, and it is always an honor to be able to stand and debate the issues that are so important to Canadians. And but, Mr. Speaker, if I could, I'd like to cast some light on some of the rabid disinformation and misinformation that is being propagated, certainly by that parliamentary secretary across the way and the House Leader from the New Democratic Party. In fact, that member will be very, very interested to hear that it's a relatively common practice to bring about amendments at report stage, and in fact it's that member himself that did so in, we have an example from 2016, and I have it in front of me, where he moved a motion that would delete Clause 1, which is the short title, and his explanation of doing so was not that he was trying to delay and stop legislation, but rather that there were important issues that needed to be discussed. And in fact, there's a number of examples where that member, that parliamentary secretary, was quick to move amendments that were in substance not necessarily substantive, but to ensure that certain issues could be discussed about, because it is some of those issues that are so important in the context of the discussions that we do have in this place. And then to remind the NDP in this place, and specifically the House Leader of the NDP, that while they are maybe the worst negotiators in the history of coalition agreements, that they have accomplished virtually nothing while propping up a government that continues to do things that they complain about on a daily basis. I'll put that issue aside. But they have actually moved a number of amendments, and in fact I have an example here from in 2018, NDP member from Victoria, seconded by a member of the Bloc Québécois, moved a motion that would have deleted a short title as well. So, Mr. Speaker, the indignation shown by other members of this place, I think, speaks to how they are so quick to dismiss the very, very valid concerns that can be brought forward, including, in this case, by members of Canada's law enforcement. And I would suggest that what drives the attitude to which they are bringing the debate into the House today is not one of wanting to pass this bill, because, Mr. Speaker, here's the facts. This bill has twice died on the order paper. And it is that government, it is the government that controls the legislative agenda. Yet this bill has twice died on the order paper, and yet they say somehow it is a priority when we are now in the third year of this Parliament, and yet here it is today. So they may want to not talk about it, they may not put a priority on it, but excuse me, Mr. Speaker, if I, along with my Conservative colleagues, when we have the opportunity to discuss important issues on a bill that we will be supporting, we will take the opportunity to do our job. Because, Mr. Speaker, that is why Canadians sent us here. So it is, I think, indicative of how truly dysfunctional those two parties are when we hear the absolutely absurd rhetoric that is being propagated by senior members of those parties. Now, Mr. Speaker, specifically when it comes to the substance of the bill that we are debating today, there is, many Canadians may not understand the specifics around what we're talking about. But I think that most Canadians would agree, and certainly those that I chat with when it comes to some of the issues that are facing Parliament. But then there are those that face challenges, those that have a complaint, when there are concerns that are brought forward, and specifically when it comes to policing and in particular the RCMP. There has to be a process in place to ensure that integrity, that complaints can be talked about, investigated, evaluated with integrity. Now, it is my understanding that as the study was undertaken at committee, there were a host of witnesses that talked about things that could be made better in this bill. Now, there's agreement among all parties that changes have to be made. And this is a shining example, despite the absurd rhetoric from other political parties here today, that there is, I think, a desire to see some changes brought forward to ensure that there is integrity within our policing system. But I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that we need to take seriously some of the suggestions that have been brought forward. various stakeholders, including Indigenous chiefs and folks from the National Police Federation, have flagged that that there will be resource issues. There are some suggestions that if we do not have a truly independent process, there will be some hesitation amongst whether that is those who come from civilian complaints or those within the RCMP, to make sure that there is that true and needed independence. Because if it is within the command structure, Mr. Speaker, you can see how I'm sure that there would be some hesitation about how, if a complaint was brought forward, that might be treated. And Mr. Speaker, I would, again, it's indicative, I think, that the other two parties in this place are concerned that we're talking about this, yet they say it's a priority. And here we have, I think, an example of that is that it is deep within their ranks. There is this anti-police, anti-law enforcement ideology that is permeating. And it's this defund the police type movement that they may not stand publicly, and a few of them have, and we've heard those things, and Conservatives have been quick to call out the absurdity of that. But it is concerning that they are so, they say in this place that it's important, yet they are unwilling to actually take action. And I would suggest that that's driving what they're, as they talk in a way that shows such indignation that we would dare talk about this, have additional debate. So I would suggest that there's a deeper cause driving that defund the police that needs to be stopped. Because I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, in Canada today, it's not easy to be a police officer. I speak with police officers on a regular basis. I compliment them and thank them for their service. Because it's not easy when you have so many things working against them, whether it's how they feel demoralized, when they put sometimes hundreds of hours of work into an investigation only for that perpetrator to be let back out on the streets. Absolutely unacceptable. Whether it be some of the other issues that are faced as we continue to bring awareness to mental health and trauma-related mental health injuries, and how all of those things brought forward. In fact, it was an honor, and my colleague from Bruce Grey Owen Sound is here, it was an honor to be able to attend the Sam Sharp dinner. Now, that was specifically in relation to the military and the story of Sam Sharp, but it talks about that bigger issue of occupational brain injuries and PTSD, and how it can have a devastating effect. So morale within police departments across Canada is certainly a huge issue. Now, if I could, Mr. Speaker, there are two specific concerns that I wanted to bring forward that are related to this, and how we need to make sure that government is responsive to the concerns. And I would simply suggest that when it comes to making sure that the RCMP and every aspect of what that looks like in terms of being able to support our men and women who wear the red serge, or whether that be the other police services across our country. It was raised to me, and I won't get into the specifics, but I have a local law enforcement member, and I know he'll know who I'm talking about. But he talked about how he served as a police officer in Afghanistan, training national police there. And he highlighted to me recently how, even though he suffered occupational stress injuries as a result of that service, and was there partnered with the RCMP, because he wasn't a current serving member of the RCMP at that time, Mr. Speaker, he is not qualified to receive the supports that RCMP members would receive, and therefore he has had to bear the brunt, and has been successful and is a community leader today, but has had to bear the brunt of being able to make sure that he fights for those supports himself. And as he shared his story with me, of which I greatly appreciated, hearing how he was fighting. And I know my time is running very, very short, Mr. Speaker, but I would simply say as well, there's so much work that needs to be done, whether it's support for our police services, municipal all the way up to the RCMP, whether it's law and justice reform, whether it be support for our veterans and our military. There's a lot that could be talked about, but Mr. Speaker, it's a worthy thing that we are talking about and something that we should continue to talk about. And I find it very, very disappointing that the Liberals and their partners in the NDP would be so quick to dismiss a chance to raise these important issues. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Interesting words. I can tell you, and I've been a parliamentarian for over 30 years now. Most of that time has been in opposition, and I can honestly say that at the end of the day, it's really amazing in terms of how this particular Conservative Party, even though it supports legislation, and the member himself said he supports the legislation, does he not realize that what they're doing with the amendment is they're attempting again to prevent the legislation from passing? If the Conservative Party was true to what they actually say inside the House, then why would they oppose having this bill actually go through automatically? The NDP proposed with unanimous consent to have it go directly into third reading, and the Conservatives say no. Would the member today make a commitment now that he would be prepared to see it start third reading today? We don't have to be debating the deletion of some 5-6 word short clause. Would he not agree with that in principle based on what he's saying?
Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
It would only be a Liberal and a socialist, of which many, I would suggest, certainly the Environment Minister openly admitted that he was a socialist. But it would only be this left-leaning coalition that we have in this country that would be so scared of doing their jobs. Terrified of it, absolutely terrified of talking about the issues that matter to Canadians. But I would ask that particular member why in December 5th of 2016, that member, I can't say his name, but the member for Winnipeg North, seconded by Mr. Graham, who is no longer a member of this place, be amended by deleting Clause 1. So, Mr. Speaker, they're accusing Conservatives of doing things that member himself has done on multiple occasions. That's nothing more than politicking, because they are hiding a defund the police, anti-police agenda within the ranks of their party. It is shameful, and they should be absolutely disgraced because of that terrible precedent that they're setting.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I take umbrage with a number of comments, starting with respect for the police. At Health Committee, we had police testify on the toxic drug crisis, and as soon as the Conservatives didn't get the answers that they didn't like, what did they do? They tried to test the credibility of the RCMP and undermine them. This is totally unacceptable. These are people that protect us day in, day out. He also cited that the NDP's got nothing done out of our deal. I'm going to name a few things. A national dental care plan, a farmer care plan so people can get insulin that have diabetes, a school lunch food program, a youth mental health fund, anti-scab legislation, a doubling of the GST tax to help people deal with inflation, a doubling of the firefighter tax credit and search and rescue tax credit, a renter protection fund, red dress alert, more money for childcare and housing. I can go on and on, Mr. Speaker, but maybe he can name just one opposition party outside of Tommy Douglas bringing in universal health care that has got more done for people, or maybe he can even name one thing that the Conservatives have gotten done in the last 9 years.
For Battle River Crowfoot.
You know, what's interesting, Mr. Speaker, is he just provided a list. I don't have time to dispel many of the myths that member is propagating. But, Mr. Speaker, let me simply say this. Even many of the things that are on that so-called list of accomplishments are things that they compromised on, things that are not actually accomplished, things that are not being delivered, or things that certainly are not, that are billed as one thing. But when Canadians, including Canadians that reach out to me to ask questions about the specifics of those programs, express extreme disappointment, including members, although there aren't too many of them. There are a few people in my constituency that have voted NDP in the past, and they have expressed to me extreme disappointment with how that member and that party has sold their souls to the Liberals. But, Mr. Speaker, let me say this when it comes to the toxic drug crisis. There is a very, very clear sentiment that I hear across this country, and it is that the failed policy that the Liberals and the NDP are pushing upon Canadians is not something that Canadians support. It needs to end. Free drugs, in many cases, taxpayer-funded drugs. We need to get people who are suffering the challenges associated with addiction into the treatment that they need so that they can get better. Not simply, as the minister suggested the other day, that they should simply not die alone. Mr. Speaker, they shouldn't die at all. Let's get them into treatment. Let's give them hope, because that's the promise of what this country is, not the embarrassment that it has become under those NDP and Liberal government.
Reprise.